Bailey, give me a high sign. All right, well, we're live here at Thinker Ventures for 1 Million Cups, which happens most Wednesdays at 9 a.m. We are slipping into fall, so we have our sweaters on today. Today we have an exciting presentation from Rob Davis. He is representing Rockford Voip, a cool voice over IP phone service in this area. He's a resident expert on all sorts of networking technologies and such. And so we're excited to hear from him. But first, we want to get out in front of you any events that the community has. Anybody know of any events that are happening in the Rockford area? I'm going to give you the catch box, courtesy of the city of Rockford. The rules are you have to catch it. She did it, and then we'll listen to that. We'll make sure we get that catch box on. I think we're set. Yeah? All right.
I'd like to invite people to join me at my table for breakfast at the Dells. It's Thursday, September 26th at 7:30 at the Pavilion at Orchard Ridge Farms in Rockton, which is a beautiful, it's beautiful there. It's been written up and in
nice.
Travel Channel and everything.
Yeah.
Breakfast is actually going to be prepared by culinary students of the Rockford Public Schools, and they do a fabulous job. And it's to support Severson Dells, which offers scouting programs, summer camps, field trips, guided walks. It's just a beautiful
It's a nice
place.
area.
Beautiful area. And so it is a fundraiser. The breakfast is free, but we'll be asking people to make a donation. There's no pressure for that. But it'll be a wonderful event, and it's, again, Thursday, September 26th, 7:30. Contact me. I'd love to have you join me at my table.
Awesome. That sounds like a great time. Any other events that you want to get out in front of the area? I know of an event. It's Fast Pitch, and I don't know the date offhand. But Fast Pitch, if you're interested in presenting your business concept to a community of people who will listen to you and then give you some feedback, you'll definitely want to be part of Fast Pitch. What was that? October 19th? All righty. I'm sorry, October 9th. You can go to NIU Eiger Lab. Do a search for NIU Eiger Lab Fast Pitch. You'll find all the information that you need to know about that, getting registered and learning how to give a great presentation, and then you could win up to, I think, $5,000. $6,000. Gosh darn it. If they'd give me a piece of paper, they up the ante. You get $1,000. It's due to inflation. We've increased the dollar amount by $1,000. All right, I think we got another event coming up.
Yes, I want to plug my talk here at 1 Million Cups next week, 9 a.m. Jefferson, what's the address?
317 West Jefferson.
317 West Jefferson. I'm Dr. Robinson from Integrative Healing Center. I'm a general surgeon and natural health and holistic nutrition practitioner. I'm going to be giving away my top 3 secrets on how to reverse any disease.
Sweet.
Any disease.
That's awesome.
So you need to be there.
All right.
Okay.
Fantastic. Sounds like a great time. Any other events that people know about in the community in the coming weeks? No? All right. Well, Rob Davis is a networking professional in the area. He happens to work here at Thinker in Tech Lab stuff. But he's also a resident expert on voice over IP phone services, which is something that I think everybody should have some understanding of. And so we're excited to hear from him. And he's from Great Britain. So that's exciting too. Great Britain and glasses, which makes you sound doubly smart. To all of us folks from the U.S. Would you welcome Rob to 1 Million Cups?
Cool. Good morning. So as well as having an accent, I've also not got a very loud voice, which is why we've got the microphones. You might have to tune into it a little bit. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a presentation on what is VoIP and then why you need it. You'll notice that we've got this logo and a website, rockfordvoip.com. You can go there and find out all about us at some point soon, because we haven't written it yet. So one of the questions we're going to ask at the end of it is, from this presentation, what do you need to know? What would you like to know? What should we put in our website? So first of all, what is VoIP? Simply, it's a way of getting your voice from a telephone transmitted over the internet instead of over dedicated voice lines. So when I first came to the States in the late 80s, something like that, to call from Washington, D.C. back to London was about $1.65 per minute. Now with Voip, I can do it for about 1 cent per minute. And if we use various other things, then it's basically free. Voip, not only can I use voice, but there's also video that can be embedded with it as well. So all sorts of technology has moved on over the years. And in fact, about 20 years ago, something like that, I was at a big broadband conference where they talked about cable TV and internet and voice. And the head of British Telecom stood up at that conference and said, there is no more profit left in voice. We can't make a profit on voice calls anymore. It will, from now onwards, be bundled with other services. So even the big telecom companies are abandoning it as a way of making money, saying that it's still a really good way for them to make money because most people don't realize they should change. So what is VoIP? It's a way of doing voice on a telephone over the internet instead of over dedicated phone lines. Why should you use it? So I mentioned that briefly. It's much cheaper than a telecom provider. It gives you much better features, and actually you're probably already using it. You just don't know it. If you've got a business telephone system, put your hand up if you're with Comcast. If you've got your lines with Comcast. Okay, AT&T? Okay, now Comcast are using VoIP. They're just selling it to you as a traditional voice line. So you've got their special box. When they came in, they wired up their special box, and they may have plumbed it into your existing box on the wall, but it's still VoIP. So the same problems that you might find in VoIP, you're going to have with Comcast as well. You just may not realize you had it. But they're charging you regular voice telephone prices for it, even though it's VoIP. Some of the problems you might get, VoIP is only as good as your internet service provider. What do I mean by that? If you talk to Comcast and get beyond their regular customer service people and get to their engineers, they will tell you that normal cable internet and voice has about a 93% uptime. That means it works for 93% of the time on average. So for 7% of the time, it's not working for one reason or another, and that can be a problem. If your internet lines come over, if your telephone lines come over your internet, then during that 7%, you may not have calls. But if you have Comcast lines, you also may not have calls because it'll just be down and nobody knows why. There can be problems with it if you have a lot of traffic. So if you're in a business and it's lunchtime and everyone is watching 4K Netflix during their lunch break, that can give you problems. There are ways around it, and normally when we provide it, we put a little router in there and it says, okay, are you watching Netflix or are you doing voice? If you're doing voice, then that has a much higher priority and Netflix has a low priority. And we can do what's called traffic shaping to make that work. But without those routers, then your voice call is going to be the same priority as your Netflix stream, and it's going to suffer. It's also really difficult to diagnose. We had an issue a couple of years ago where somebody just said, our calls keep dropping out and we don't know why. So we tried to investigate what was actually going on. What it was their cable line was stretched over a tin roof, which had frozen, and the cable line was embedded in an ice jam and had moisture inside of it. So we were able to diagnose that and say, you need to call Comcast and get that line replaced because it's causing you issues. And it's not just voice, although that's what you can hear, but it's causing you issues with all of your internet work. The next question, VoIP should be sold differently to regular telephone lines. I say should because Comcast still charges you by traditional telephone lines. So Comcast bills are roughly $35 a line per month. If you want 5 lines, because you might get 5 telephone calls at the same time, that's going to be 5 times 35. They might roll that into a little bit of a discount after about your first 4 lines, give you the rest at $25, but that's still a lot. VoIP changes that because we use something called channels instead. So what's a channel? Well, you separate your telephone number, which is actually what people use to contact you, and you have that, and then you have the number of channels. It's the number of concurrent telephone calls you can have at the same time. So we sell it by telephone number, which is actually quite cheap, and then by channels. And then if you're saying, okay, we've got 3 staff, they might all be using the telephone at the same time, and then we've got a 4th person, and they're driving around, we might suggest to you to get 4 or 5 channels. The reason for that is that your call will come in, and then a staff person might answer it. They might transfer it to the person in their car. That will go to their cell phone. That's technically 2 channels, because you've got this person coming in on one, and then going out to a cell phone on the other. But channels are much less expensive than traditional lines. And also they're dynamic. So the way we work is, although we've given you 4 lines, if occasionally you need to use 8 lines, we're going to give you 8 lines. But if you use 8 lines all the time, we're going to talk to you and say, hey, you're using these 8 lines, we need to revisit this discussion. And our stuff will actually scale up to 25 lines at a time. That would be a really expensive Comcast bill, because you would have to have 25 physical lines from their boxes plumbed into your box on the wall, which is the next point. What is a PBX? So if you've got more than one person, then, and you've got extensions around your building, then you've probably got a PBX. And this normally looks the same. It's basically a box that's screwed to the wall with a whole bunch of spaghetti coming out of the side of it, which is almost impossible to try and decipher. Not only that, what's happened over the years is that you may have used to got your lines from AT&T, and then you switched it to TDS or someone like that. And so TDS came out and they just literally cut the wires from AT&T, brought in their own wires and repunched them down. And then you may have switched to Comcast, so they came along and cut the wires from TDS and left them hanging, put their boxes in and plumbed their stuff in. So you've got all this historical lines around this spaghetti just confusing something. And it takes an expert to work out how to get this line from this part of the building, put it into this PBX, and make it go out there. And just to trace that spaghetti, unless it's all labeled properly, which, to be honest with you, traveling around this city, it never is, how to make that work. The other problem is that these were old computers. A lot of PBXs that I come across are at least 10 years old. Now, if you imagine you've got a computer that's 10 years old, you know that the hard drive in that computer should not be trusted, that it's time probably to upgrade it. But you've still got a hard drive in this PBX. If that goes, nobody is out there that knows how to reprogram that box. So our suggestion is replace the PBX. But a PBX normally is sold separately. It's the box on the wall. So a traditional company would have a contract with Comcast. They provide my lines. But I have a contract with a communications company. They fix the box on the wall if there's a problem. If I can't work out how to add another phone, I'll call them in and they'll make that happen for me. The job of it is to route calls from your external lines to your internal extensions. That's basically all it needs to do. And a legacy PBX can be too expensive to repair, particularly if they're older than 10 years. A Voip PBX is something slightly different. It's a computer running software on an external server. What do I mean by external? It's a little box, literally about that big if we install them inside or on your site, or we can place them at Amazon. And we recommend placing them at someone like Amazon or Google because of that 93% uptime. The reason for that is your caller doesn't care that your internet is down, but they do want to speak to you. So if that box is not on your site, but it's at Amazon, Amazon almost never goes down. I say almost never because it went down on Saturday morning, but that's very rare. It almost never goes down. So When someone calls you, they'll hear your voice, even though your internet might be down. They'll hear, thank you for calling Restoration Tools. For instance, if you know your party's extension, you may dial it at any time. On your business cards, you might have given out your extension number. It is quite likely that anyone under the age of 40 is just going to dial your extension if they know it, because they don't want to speak to the middle person. They just want to speak to you. Now, your phones are down, but you've given them your extension. So what'll happen is the box at Amazon is going to work out, the phone doesn't work, I'm going to go through to his cell phone instead. And then your cell phone rings. So that's how we get around that 7% of time when things might be down. And that's why we recommend putting them at Amazon or Google. And it's considerably cheaper to configure and adapt. To give you a rough quote, it costs about $1,000 to set it all up, configure it, and then minor changes are handled in a monthly fee. It'll cost you $10,000 to replace that box on the wall. Why Voip helps? So Voip is going to offer you state-of-the-art features on a small budget, on a small business budget. It also makes your business appear much larger. What do I mean by that? If you're a small business, okay, if you're a small business and you're operating on a cell phone, then you might get that incoming call mixed up with your personal calls. How do you know it's business? How do you know it's personal? What do you put on your voicemail message? Do you say, thank you for calling Charlie of Restoration Tools and maybe Serve Pro? Leave a message after the tone. If you put yourself on a PBX, what it does is it identifies your business straight away. It allows you to have more than one person as you need to. But also, if you know your party's extension, you may dial it at any time. Creates the impression that your business is much bigger. And then it goes to your cell phone, so you don't need to give your cell phone number out to prospective clients. You can hide your cell phone number, and you can fail over to your cell phone. We've got some clients that have PBXs, but they don't have physical phones. It literally just comes in and goes straight out to their cell phones. And they prefer that because it gives them a bigger presence. And one telephone number can reach 2 or 3 staff while they're out on the road. How much does it cost? It's difficult to give you a flat price because we design each system specifically for each individual business. Price includes setup and phones, and then a monthly rate. So normally what would happen is I would come and talk to you, and I would probably say, can I see your Comcast bill? What I'm looking for is, how many lines do you have with Comcast? If you've just got a cell phone, we'd probably talk slightly differently. And then I put all the numbers into our spreadsheet, and it'll calculate how much your setup costs are going to be, how much the phones are going to cost, and then a monthly rate. So although your PBX and your telephone lines are sold separately, we actually put them together. So you'd rent a PBX because we're renting the server time from Amazon. And we'd roll that in with the price of the lines. So normally it pays for itself, all the setup and everything like that, through savings from Comcast over about 2 years. So I said before, you might have 4 lines if you're a reasonably small business, you've got a couple of staff, you might have 4 lines with Comcast. That's 4 times 35. Your bill with us is likely to come in at something like 60 or 70, including the rental of the PBX. So here's a rough guide. Configuration setup, maybe 600. The phones, which I can show you later, actually, let me show you these now. These are what I consider state-of-the-art. We specialize in one phone. That's not to say that we're not going to give you more choice, but we specialize in these because we know these really well. They're made by a Chinese company, but they have all the features of a phone double its price. So it's a nice color screen. You can put your extensions on these buttons at the top. When you're on a call, it all changes so that you can easily transfer to people. This particular system doesn't care whether you're in 1 building, 2 buildings, or 5 buildings. And you could still see the status of someone else's extension. So for a while, we were operating in 2 buildings. Calls might come in, I might need to transfer it to someone in the other building, and I could see that their lamp was red and they're on the phone or not available. So I can say, well, they're not available at the moment, but I can transfer you to the voicemail. And you can do that through multiple locations. So you can have a look at this afterwards. We use these here and have for a couple of years and really, really like them. And then the last thing is, I've mentioned it briefly, but how does an incoming call flow into the system? How is that different? So there's a lot of discussion about whether this way is better than the traditional, when someone calls, I wanted to just ring all the office phones and someone to pick up. And this is an age thing. If you're over a certain age, that's probably what you prefer. You want someone to pick up the phone within about 4 rings, and say, hello, thank you for calling, whatever the name of the company is, how can I direct your call? If you're about 40 or younger, you don't want to speak to that person. In fact, you don't really want to speak to anyone, but that's another issue. But you don't want to speak to that person. So we recommend a typical call flow like this. The first thing it does is check if you're open. So we know your opening hours. We're not going to ring your phones if you're closed and it's a Sunday. And then it gives you an announcement. Hello, thank you for calling Restoration Tools. If you know your party's extension, you may dial it at any point. Otherwise, please hold while we try to connect you. It waits 3 or 4 seconds for someone to type in that number, and then it'll ring whatever what we call a ring group is, and that's a grouping of phones. It can be dynamic, people can sign in and out of it, or we can set it up, the same phones ring all the time. And then if nobody answers, because the office might not have anyone there, it might be lunchtime, it'll go to voicemail, and then it'll email you that voicemail, which is really useful, particularly if you're out traveling, because you don't want to wait until you get back to your desk to check your voicemails. So it just sends it as an MP3, you click on it from your mail application on your phone, and it'll play it to you. If you're closed, you still get the same announcement. Thank you for calling Restoration Tools. Our office is closed at the moment. If you know your party's extension, you may dial it at any point. So if someone needs to get through to you, they might do, and you can allow it to route through to your cell phone, even though the office is closed, if you want that. And then it'll go straight to voicemail and email you the message straight away. So that's a little bit about how it works. Hopefully I've answered some questions.
All right, well, let's give Rob a hand for his presentation on voice over IP phone services. We do ask every presenter to answer 3 important questions as part of their presentation. Yeah, I think you are very familiar with these questions. Do you know what the questions are?
Yeah, but I blank them every time because I'm doing the live stream.
Yes, he's usually managing the live stream. The first question is, what is the product or service in your own words? What'd you hear? Voice over IP phone service? Yeah. What else?
It's the way businesses are going for their communication.
Yeah, the way businesses are going for voice communications. Yep. Any other thoughts from what you heard? Who's the target audience is the second question.
Businesses that have traditional phone service.
Okay, businesses with traditional phone service. Yep. Absolutely. Other thoughts?
Way of lowering costs of doing business.
Yep. Yep, it certainly is a way of lowering costs. What else? Who would you recommend as a target audience?
I also think it's for people that are running a small business from a cell phone.
So kind of 1 to 3
Yep.
people?
1 to 3 people. It's to remove the cell phone number from the process.
The largest installation you have has what, 40, 50 people in the
Something
company?
like that, yeah, over multiple locations.
Over 3, yeah, I think 3 locations. Yeah, so it scales up too. Yeah. Third question is, what's amazing about the management team? You didn't say much about yourself.
No.
No. But give us a little background about you. Why do you know networks so well?
I was the first person in my year at school to get into computers, which made me the best because I was the first person in the year, but I had to work hard to keep that status. So this was right at the beginning of when computers were starting to be sold in the home. My next door neighbor had his office computer at his house and taught me programming. So I got into it. That's exciting. So I got into it really early with the help of my next door neighbor, and have enjoyed programming over the last 30, 40 years.
And what did you spent some time in Italy doing some networking things as well?
I did. So I've kind of straddled two career paths over the last few years. One of them is computer networks, and the other is as working for a mission organization for a church. So from 93 until 2009, we worked for a mission organization, and we were what's called bivocational. So I worked for them, and I worked doing computer networks. While we lived in Italy, we planted a church, or started a church there, and I did broadband internet. So there were many places in Italy that didn't have DSL. There's no cable over there. They didn't have DSL, so we provided high-speed internet at wireless and put all sorts of wireless stuff on people's rooftops, broadcast an internet signal from a mountain down over the top of a city to a village the other side of it, which was pretty cool. So we did Wi-Fi at 22 kilometers.
Which is how many miles?
Less. 12 or
A lot.
13. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a pretty big deal. If you're in the networking world, broadcasting Wi-Fi that distance is a big deal.
But we still can't pick up Wi-Fi from the kitchen to the... No, it's...
Right, exactly. Yeah, you still couldn't get it in your bathroom. Well, let's talk a little bit about questions and answers. We'll give just a couple minutes here for Q&A. If you have any questions for Rob about voice over IP, now's your opportunity. I don't know where the catch box went. Somebody
over there.
Yep. If you got the catch box, grab the catch box. Speak into the catch box. We'll answer your questions over the next couple of minutes.
I don't have a question, but I just want to comment that I have voice over IP, and I love it. People don't know the difference, because that's always a concern, will people be able to tell the difference? And for me, the answer is no, and I have saved a lot of money.
I would say, actually, we've had one client that said that the quality of voice calls, when everything's working correctly, is much better than a traditional line, because there's more bandwidth. So you sound better on the phones.
So will you go to a business and explain
Yeah.
to everybody?
Yes, I would. So normally we would go there and talk with whoever the decision maker is to start off with and try and formulate a plan. I'm a network engineer, so going in there, I know VoIP can succeed or fail based on the office network. So I might recommend, okay, we're going to have to run extra wires into these areas because these wires are 15 years old and not good enough. That kind of thing might be a particular issue. But we will go there and work out a plan to make it work properly. And then when we do the install, we'll sit with each person and show them the brief features of the phone.
So what wire do you normally use?
So it doesn't use phone wire, it uses network cable.
Okay.
So it's got to be, because it's over the internet, it's got to be really good quality Ethernet cabling. And then normally the phones are powered from a central location. You can power them from a power adapter, but it gets a little bit messy. So we would suggest for every desk, if you're going into a new build, you put 2 Ethernet cables per desk, one for the computer, one for the phone.
Is it necessary?
It is not necessary, but it is best practice.
So it sounds like there are a lot of options
Yep.
on how to configure things. Yeah. Okay. Do you have a follow-up question on that? No? Other questions about voice over IP? Yeah, in the back.
So my question is actually related to cell service. So if you're doing voice over IP for your cells connected to that business and you're traveling a lot, I've had problems with my voice over IP and not being able to get service in certain areas, especially as I get a little more remote.
Yeah.
What kind of solutions are there for that?
The main solution is the system has a certain period of time that it tries to reach you in. So it's technically called follow me. So if you had a desk phone, you can then have a bunch of different numbers. It doesn't care whether it's a cell phone, it's your home phone, whatever it is. It'll ring all of them at the same time. And the first one to pick up, if nobody picks up in 20 seconds, it'll go to your voicemail. And then you can change your outgoing message, whatever. It'll record that voicemail and email it to you. So if you don't have cell phone coverage, it's not going to get through to you, but you are going to get the voicemail as soon as you do get coverage.
You could also presumably program that so that if the cell phone didn't answer, then it gets routed to a different number where somebody could answer it.
Yeah, so the programming of what happens if you don't answer in 20 seconds can be programmed by extension. Normally we drop it through to voicemail. We could send it back to the operator or the ring group. That's where we configure a system based on what you want.
And I just have maybe a thought in that if somebody's waiting for her to pick up her phone, are they hearing a ring, or what's the experience like for the end user?
We can configure that. They can either have hold music. We've got 2 companies that actually contracted their hold music out, and they have various announcements about their company. You could hear that. You could hear a ring, a traditional ring, or you could hear like a Casio concert, the old, really cheap public
Like a 1980s Casio?
Yeah.
Well, let's not do that.
So lift music, elevator music.
Nope. Yeah, the Casio, that was cool for 10 seconds back in the 80s.
So it can be configured. The system takes MP3 files. The issue with just putting, I don't know, Ed Sheeran on there is going to be copyright, because technically you're broadcasting. So you can't just put your favorite song in there.
Other thoughts, questions about voice over IP? Alrighty. Well, we'll wrap up. Rob, fantastic presentation. Let's give this guy a hand. Oh, we have another thought. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. The 4th question is what can we do to help? What can we do to help you? What can 1 Million Cups community do to help you?
Probably my first question is, our next stage is to develop the website. So the Voip that we've been doing for the last 6 years has been fully part of Thinker Tech, and 2 of our projects we're going to rename, rebrand, and separate out slightly. So Voip and hosting. So next week sometime we're going to come to start designing what we want, or what people want to know from a website. My technical experience would make it way too technical. So that's really where you could help us. What do you think? What would you want to read from something like that?
Cool. Well, if you've got questions or if you've got answers for him on how to simplify the sales presentation, or you've got an idea of what you need to hear or see as part of marketing that, it sounds like that's what you're asking for, connect up with him afterwards. We do want to thank our coffee sponsor, Jorge Herrera from Rockford Bank and Trust. Let's give him a hand. And we will be back next week to talk about how to heal three easy steps to heal from any disease, which is from all disease, which is going to be an interesting presentation. I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say about that. We will see you next week at 9 a.m. at Thinker Ventures. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.